Hey, Steve Magnante here at High-Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts with a 2003 Dodge Viper, the car that Chrysler Corporation designed to dethrone the Chevrolet Corvette, and for the most part, it did. No, though not in sales, but performance on these things was pretty radical until you get into the ZR1 Corvettes and that sort of hyper machines. But again, these are nasty performers. This right here will go 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds or run the quarter mile in 11.7 seconds. Now, these were available as a coupe or a roadster, and the roadster we see here is actually 80 pounds lighter than the coupe. Crazy but true, despite the fact that this has underpinnings that are fortified, a lot of aluminum in use, lightweight materials on the part of the Dodge stylists and designers to make these 80 pounds lighter than the coupes. And the coupes are nice, but the problem with those is you feel cooped up inside of the coupe. It's very claustrophobic, not a lot of airflow. This open-air roadster is a great car to have on a sunny day or a spring, just a beautiful fall day. This one has just about 19,000 miles on it. In fact, careful miles. I believe the original Sport P0 tires are on it still from the factory, and that's a great sign. When they're bald, you know that it's been driven hard, but this is a great example of very well preserved. Okay, let's look under the hood and see what this engine looks like. It's going to be a V10, but which one? Let's have a peek. When the third generation Viper arrived in 2002, Dodge went from 8 liters to 8.2 liters of displacement from the pushrod V10 under the hood. Now, of course, from the beginning, every Viper had a V10 engine right under the hood. And crazy but true, this is basically a descendant of the mighty Mopar small block. The bolt pattern on the back for the transmission is the same, the bore spacing is the same, except this is 10 cylinders instead of 8. This push rod's in here, this push rod's in, again, Walkaround, it's not an overhead cam, belt driven, anything. It's a very reliable engine, easily go 100,000 miles with maintenance and proper care. But you gotta love the twin throttle body right here, twin Venturi, if you will, and the ram-tuned intake manifold right here. This tube feeds that bank, this plenum feeds this bank for a slight ram tuning effect at certain RPMs. This one has air conditioning, which something was minimally seen on the first generation Viper, and a really good job of packaging all this engine under the hood. And speaking of that hood, it is functional in many ways. On the front of the hood, we have this duct right here, which feeds cool outside air into the underside of the hood for use where it feeds into the front of the air supply right here, the air pan. And a great example of good engineering where one part does more than one job. At the front of this, we see a massive aluminum radiator, crossflow, tilted on an angle, which allowed for a lower nose and a lower hood line. And again, the stylists and the engineers working hand in hand to create the best Viper possible. And of course, unlike earlier Vipers, which have an open and clamshell hood, the third gen cars have a proper rear hinged hood, a little bit easier to deal with and to get into for maintenance and service. Not that you have to maintain or service these very much at all. But here we have it right here. It's almost mid-engine, not quite. The engine setback is pretty severe. The rear cylinders are under the cowl, under the windshield right there, which really helps to give it nearly a 50-50 weight distribution, despite the fact this is an all-aluminum V10. And again, it is all aluminum. There's no iron blocks here. There was a truck version of the V10, which is a whole different creature. It was tuned for low RPM torque, and it did have iron blocks, which are pretty hefty. But the Viper, all aluminum, the heads and the block. Let's go inside and see what we find there. And inside, between the bucket seats, we see a 6-speed manual transmission. In fact, no automatic transmissions were ever installed in Vipers. With that said, the Ram SRT-10 pickup truck could be had with an automatic transmission behind its Viper-sourced V10, but this is strictly a 6-speed manual right there, a true sports car, as they should be. And this one has a 220 mile per hour speedometer, which is pretty realistic. If you had enough space, you could probably get this up to about, I would say, 215, 220, well, 200 miles an hour for sure on the right road. And again, the aerodynamics of the Roadster were not as good as the coupe, so these were limited by maybe 5 miles an hour less than a coupe. But again, you'd have the wind blowing through your hair at 200 miles per hour, which that sounds pretty good. Take that, Hair Club for Men. And inside, of course, beautiful dressings from 2003, a CD player, something I love, and there it is right there. It's a 6-disc CD changer. You can put in your Milli Vanilli or your Wham or whatever music you want to listen to right in there. No problem with XM, but there it is. A very original car in many ways. And here we have the original owner's manual, this thing right here, with the Viper embossed in the cover right there. And inside of this, all the information you need to keep your car running and happy. The Viper SRT-10 Roadster right there, and basically how to drive it and what's best, how to maintain it properly, and care and feeding, as it were. And one thing I'll tell you about Vipers of all stripes is if you drive these things aggressively, beware the 2-3 upshift. If you try and power shift that, these things get really tail happy. So the 2-3 upshift, there's enough low end torque to basically send the tail spinning around. So be very careful on the 2-3 upshift. Otherwise, you're good. Anyway, beautiful example right here. It's very pure inside, unmolested, all factory stock, every bit of it. And under that stick shift is 500 horsepower and 512 foot-pounds of torque to move this car down the road with alacrity, as they say in the dictionary. Let's look inside the trunk and see what we find there. Before we get into the trunk, one thing that's kind of cool about the Gen 3 Vipers, standard air conditioning, power windows. The earliest Vipers had curtains on the side doors. You had to put these things in, and when it rained, you had to get out and put the curtains in, just a pure British sports car effect, if you will. But by the third generation, even the second gen, power windows were absolutely standard equipment and much appreciated by most Viper owners. With that said, even a power trunk lock opener right here, seen only on the Roadster. This opens up, and up comes the trunk. There's a good amount of space in here to put a couple of small bags for a weekend trip, perhaps some light grocery shopping. And again, we see the Viper snake icon right there. And just a beautiful car in so many ways. The bodies on these is not fiberglass. It's actually SMC sheet molded compound, which gives you a nice smooth finish with minimal need for hand finishing before paint at the factory. And these are built at the Conner Ave assembly plant in Detroit, Michigan, a dedicated assembly line just for Vipers to make sure the quality control was high. And even the guys who worked on it were sort of auditioned to make sure they were ready to work in slow motion and do the best job possible on a car that cost multiples of a Dodge Charger or Challenger or anything like that. So a great example here of the SRT10 Viper. To learn more about this car and see pictures of it, go to the High-Octane Classics website and check out the photo gallery.